On July 2009, there was an article that was published in the Asahi Shimbun, one of the oldest and largest newspapers in Japan, with the title, "Eating Meals in Toilets Because I Have No Friends." And the content of the article was mainly about how many university students in Japan were currently eating meals alone inside public toilet booths in order to not show other people on how they had no friends to eat their meals together with and be seen in a public setting where they are eating their meals alone. Now, when you see such a phenomenon manifesting in Japan, a few questions may arise. First, out of all places, why toilets? After all, it is indeed a very unsanitary place to be having your meal, and there could be other places in which you can eat alone where other people won't be able to spot you. Second, out of all places, why is this happening in Japan? As many people know that Japan is probably one of the most tolerant places in the world, where it is quite fine and is socially accepted to be eating alone in the restaurants. If you have ever visited Japan, you may have seen numerous restaurants with booths such as this and this, all intended for the customers to eat their food peacefully when they visit the dining establishment alone. And many people from within Japan also asked the same set of questions, as many had the same response of surprise and shock after reading the Asahi Shimbun article. Many in fact questioned the validity of all claims made within the article, stating that it was once again the acts of journalists in Japan making things up and sensationalizing things in order to attract attention and gain more viewership. But then the people who work at Japan's Asahi Shimbun newspaper are mostly not your unqualified, ethics-lagging yellow journalists that are prevalent in Japan. So 2 months later, the people at Asahi Shimbun came back with a follow-up article, this time with clear facts procured from a survey conducted at Japan's Hosei University by Professor Naoki Ogi, and how based on surveying 487 students, 2.3% of the students admitted to having experienced eating toilet meals during their time as university students. And numerous social research were conducted subsequent to the initial 2009 article, which further substantiated the real-life existence of the toilet meal phenomenon in Japan. Japan's My Navy News surveyed 1,000 people in 2012, where 7.1% of the survey participants have admitted to eating meals in public toilets. What is staggering to see is that within the Sunfair Holdings survey, 80% of women in their 20s admitted to having eaten a toilet meal. But in all fairness, I believe that the 80% number could be a bit exaggerated, as the numbers also include eating meals in all forms of toilets, such as toilets inside one's own house. And not all meals eaten in toilets are due to reasons such as having no friends or the fear of being seen eating alone. Some people might genuinely be in a hurry to get somewhere and need to eat a quick bento before moving. And with walking and eating at the same time generally being frowned upon in Japan, some could just be eating in a public restroom in order to quickly eat their food while still conforming to the social norm of not eating while walking in public or eating inside the train. But with that said, with a lot of data backing it up, we now know that the quote-unquote toilet meal phenomenon in Japan is also not entirely an urban myth, but a very tangible reality for many of the ordinary people in Japan, especially for the people in their 20s. So, what is the cause of such a lamentable phenomenon? And why in Japan, out of all places, where eating meals alone is regarded generally as not out of the norm and is not much socially frowned upon? The answer to this question is setting. Many of the people in Japan are completely fine when it comes to eating meals alone in a city setting of 20 million people, where the people within the city mostly have no association and acquaintance with one another. But when it comes to a small group setting such as at school or at work, where everybody knows one another, it becomes a completely different story. In a tightly formed group setting such as at school or at work, a rather significant portion of the people in Japan are worried about how they will be perceived by the other individuals of the group and have constant anxiety over the possibility that they may be evaluated as rather low-worth individuals by the consisting members of the group. First of all, I'd like to mention that we have to be extremely cautious not to overgeneralize the psychological experience of all Japanese people as the same, as personal experience is something that is highly equivocal and multidimensional. And such worries of potentially being looked down upon by the other members of the group in which you belong to is not a sentiment that is only felt by the Japanese, but for many of us all. But due to the prevalence of such psychological experience felt by many of the individuals in Japan, Japanese psychologist Machizawa Shizuo came out and even provided a term to describe the psychological tendency as quote-unquote Lunchmate syndrome, and stated that toilet meal phenomenon was a rather extreme physical manifestation of this, conducted by the individuals whose level of internal anxiety is truly heightened by the potential negative external evaluation made by others onto them, and thus by any means necessary, we will do whatever it takes to eliminate the potential possibility of being negatively judged by others. As in, for the people who psychologically suffer from the Lunchmate syndrome, the toilet booth inside public bathrooms may be the most obvious, rational choice when it comes to being a safe haven where they can eat their meals without worry. Let's say that in order to not be spotted by others, they attempt to eat meals at staircases of the university in which people rarely frequent. But then, as much as the particular area is rarely frequented, there is indeed, however small, a possibility that someone might pass by that staircase and spot a particular individual who's eating lunch alone. And in that case, the humiliation or shame felt by the Japanese college student will oftentimes be just too much to bear. By the way, if you'd like to learn more about such unique aspects of the Japanese cultural psychology that has never yet been discussed in the realm of traditional publications, please consider purchasing our book, The Secrets of the Japanese Mind. What makes studying the Japanese cultural psychology oftentimes tremendously insightful is not only from the uniqueness of the type of psychological phenomena that occurs to the people of the nation, but oftentimes the sheer intensity in which they can bring an already well-known psychological condition that also exists in individuals from other nationalities to absolute new heights. To elaborate, I would like to re-emphasize that it may not only be the people from Japan who suffers from the Lunchmate syndrome. Many of us may oftentimes feel the same sense of anxiety and loneliness that can be accompanied psychologically when eating a meal alone. But at the same time, while the type of sentiments that we feel may be similar, the degree in which the particular sentiment is felt may vary largely upon the individual. And for many of the individuals living in Japan, the degree in which a certain sentiment is felt is often on the extreme end of the spectrum. And this extreme nature of the personal psychological experience underwent by many of the individuals in Japan often leads to equal levels of extreme physical manifestations. Let's think of some hypothetical scenarios. While we may just kind of be stressed out at the situation of having no friends and having to eat lunch alone in college dining hall, if we are indeed hypothetically faced with such a situation, many of the Japanese university students will take this fear of being seen eating alone to the very extreme and thus make tantamount extreme actions such as bringing their meals to the public restrooms and eat inside public toilets. And in the worst of cases, many are reported to just skip eating meals altogether, or in the absolute worst case, just quit college altogether due to this reason of friendlessness and the type of negative social evaluation that is associated with such a stigma. And this extreme nature of the personal psychological experience underwent by many of the individuals in Japan often leads to equal levels of extreme physical demonstrations of this. For example, how about when an individual feels an extreme sense of personal antipathy towards all things traditionally considered as masculine, such as the pressure to be quote-unquote manly, be the breadwinner, get married, and have kids? Japan is home to one of the most extreme anti-masculine, in the traditional sense, passive group of men in the world, known as herbivore men, whose entire lives involves around never being interested in dating, marriage, or people of the opposite gender. But on the complete opposite end of the spectrum of this, how about for the male individuals in Japan whose personal psychological experience is that of having to prove oneself to be masculine or macho and not be one of those types of passive, non-assertive male figures that are increasingly becoming more and more prevalent in Japan? As much as the Western media does not like to report on this, as they just love portraying the Japanese people, the men in particular, as these passive herbivore type, not having kids type of people, if you actually come and actually live in the very grounds of the Japanese society and be skin to skin with these people for prolonged periods of time, you come to realize that Japan is also the home to who you would consider as the most quote-unquote macho or masculine types of people in the world, who literally just act like this their entire lives.
어른이言ってんだろう。やるか？
As the eminent social psychologist Hofstede has said, Japan does indeed rank as one of the highest countries in the world in terms of the social masculinity scale. And we can just go on and on about these types of various physical manifestations that are caused by the often extreme nature of the personal psychological experience felt by the individuals in Japan. And in all reality, the toilet meal syndrome in Japan is exactly this: the psychological tendency to fear being considered as less by others within a group setting, and thus conducting whatever action necessary in order to avoid this from happening, taken to the absolute extreme degree of intensity the Japanese way. But then you might ask, why not just make friends then? And that is indeed a good question, and is, at least theoretically, a viable answer to cure the toilet meal phenomenon in Japan. But what we also have to consider is, on a line, there are always two ends of an extreme. So while there is the extreme anxiety over not being able to make friends in a social setting, there is also the fear or extreme anxiety over the potential possibility of getting hurt by the other individual or the quote-unquote friend once the friendship has been formed. And I believe we can all partly relate to this as well. There are often times when we are nice to other people and establish a type of friendship with them. Then what often happens afterwards is that they cross the line in terms of the type of things in which they can do or they can say, or purely due to the fact that you are literally nice enough to be kind to them and treat them with a sense of dignity, they all of a sudden think that they're above you and believe that they can walk all over you. But then, what can we do? You can't really talk sense into such people. Usually when you do make an attempt to talk sense into these people, their reaction is more or less like... Japanese psychologist Hidetada Shimizu coined such people who manipulate and take advantage of other people to satisfy selfish motives as quote-unquote saboteurs. To elaborate, let's create a hypothetical situation. A Japanese university student by the name of Ken is being bullied and made fun of by a number of bullies from the same university department in a very slimy, passive-aggressive way. Not being able to take it anymore, Ken lashes out onto them. But instead of fighting back, the bullies say that Ken lacks the Japanese sense of omoyari, or the feeling of empathy, in that Ken cannot empathize with just the simple quote-unquote jokes that the bullies are always throwing at Ken. In this sense, the bullies are manipulating or quote-unquote sabotaging the official meaning of omoyari in order to justify their actions and make Ken look like the weird, socially awkward one. And such saboteurs do exist in the West as well, most notably, quote-unquote, "it's just a prank bro," or "why so serious," stating types of saboteurs. But once again, we cannot talk sense into such people, as then they will manipulate and sabotage the meaning of a certain word such as omoyari, or prank, or joke, in order to justify their actions and turn the victim into the weird, socially awkward one. And if talking sense into these people can't work, then there's pretty much nothing we can do. Can we arrange an MMA match to legally be allowed to provide hurt to the other person who has offended you? In most cases, you cannot. So what do we do in the modern society when we are hurt by others? We just have to take it in, internalize it, and again, be stressed from it. It is an unfortunate but an undeniable facet of the modern human condition. But as I've stated earlier, whatever form of anxiety or stress we may receive from a social setting or an existing friendship that we have, again, without wanting to overgeneralize, the personal experience felt by a Japanese individual in a similar situation may oftentimes be much greater in its degree that may often go beyond our imagination. So, quite naturally, while many individuals in Japan fear not having friends and being considered as less by others because of such status of friendlessness, they also equally fear the whole idea of having to expose oneself and just the whole sense of vulnerability that is associated with intimate friendships or relationships in general, and how you can often be taken advantage of by saboteurs and other types of people who portray psychological tendencies that are analogous or very similar to the psychiatric concept of sociopathy in such situations of openness and vulnerability. And amidst this inexorable situation of no clear, definitive answer that is our human condition as social creatures, many individuals in Japan either follow the path as in the famous quote said by the one and only Friedrich Nietzsche, as in, to quote, "Whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stronger." To elaborate, in this anxiety and fear-ridden society that can be Japan, many Japanese individuals overcome this fear and anxiety and become one of the most mentally self-assured individuals on earth that just cannot be played any games with psychologically, and have this sense of impregnable equanimity that not many individuals on earth can dare to imitate. But sadly, more often than not, many individuals in Japan also follow the path that largely resembles the famous quote said by another one and only, the Joker from The Dark Knight, as in,
"I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger."
To shun from being negatively judged by others as having no friends, many begin to eat their meals in toilets. To shun from being taken advantage of by bullies and saboteurs out there in society, many choose to become hikikomoris, never leaving their rooms for decades on end. Thank you for watching the video. If you have liked the video that we have made for today, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.